Chapter 30. Size of Your Dragon. Caden woke up to his little sister hawking over him. He grimaced and rubbed his face with both hands.
"What's up, Till?"
he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. Last night's shift and flying and the kiss had exhausted him. It felt too early to be up, and his alarm hadn't gone off. It was his sister poking him in the side again and again that had finally roused him.
"You're in trouble,"
she said simply.
"Mom and Dad are on the warpath, and I'm suffering for your mistakes."
He looked at her blearily.
What? Why? And how?"
They were hysterical after hearing about the humans' first bombing last night. And instead of getting a call, text, or email from you, they had some of those claw people show up in civilian clothes. Those clothes are fooling no one, by the way. The whole neighborhood is buzzing about us receiving the King's Guard.
That had Caden rocketing upright and nearly bumping his head with his sister's. Luckily, she had the reflexes of a cat. His dragon reflexes seemed to be dormant, as Iolaire had cracked one eyelid and gone back to bed once it realized it was just Tilly waking them, and she didn't have food, so sleep it was.
"I couldn't call, text, or email them because..."
He grimaced. He couldn't, because he'd been hiding behind a market stall, watching the humans' first meeting that had been bombed, and he couldn't leave any trace, electronic or otherwise, of him anywhere by the meeting. And then they'd been doing this shifting thing, and clothes had disappeared, and he really hadn't thought much about anything except a certain black dragon king.
"They were told I was fine. In person. That should be more than enough."
Caden, have you lost your mind?
Tilly's hands were on her hips. She looked so much like their mother at that moment that he almost laughed and pointed it out. Not wanting her to punch him, he remained silent.
I don't think..."
You must not have been thinking if you believed our parents would accept anything except for you to be home safe after hearing about a second bomb attack.
Tilly actually pinched the bridge of her nose. That was like their dad. He shifted his legs off of the bed and gave her a crooked smile.
"So we have to escape out the window again today, huh?"
Her serious expression cracked for a second as a smile threatened to break across her face. But then she shook her head vehemently.
You have to see and talk to them. They're not letting me leave the house through the door or window. You are likely going to end up chained in the basement if you keep on like this. Just face them. Figure this out. I want things to go back to normal.
"If we went back to normal, you couldn't ride an Iolaire's back."
He touched her nose with one finger. She laughed and then looked deliriously delighted for a moment.
Flying on a dragon.
But then she smacked her forehead with one hand.
Wait, no, don't distract me. This is serious, Caden. You've got to fix things with Mom and Dad, or otherwise we'll both never be leaving this house again.
He sighed and scrubbed his face with both hands. She was right. He had to explain to his parents that he didn't want their interference, which already made this conversation with them sound even more unlikely to go in his favor, in his head. He didn't want Raven shifters writing law briefs about his inalienable rights. The moment this thing headed to the courts, he would be outed, no matter if they called him Dragon Doe number 1. Besides, he trusted Valerius now. They were building a friendship? Relationship? He wasn't quite sure, but it was something that didn't need lawyers and judges involved.
"I'll fix it, Till,"
he told her, as he pushed himself upright and padded over to the desk chair that was covered in clothes. He found some drawstring pads that looked mostly clean, and his favorite soft white t-shirt. He turned back to her. She was biting her lower lip, clearly unconvinced of his convincing skills with their parents. He put an arm around her slender shoulders.
"Come on, let's go face the parents."
She sighed, and the two of them walked out of his bedroom. The moment they set foot in the hallway, Caden's nose was filled with the most delicious scent of pancakes and bacon. His stomach grumbled in appreciation. Tilly laughed and they hurried up their pace. While Caden had no desire to actually discuss things with his parents, he wanted those pancakes. They found both of their parents in the kitchen. Their mother was standing over the griddle, flipping plate-sized golden pancakes, while their father sat at the kitchen island, reading a sheaf of papers intently. There was a large jug of orange juice on the counter and a plate of bacon already set out. Caden grabbed a piece, letting out an
Ah.
as it was still hot, before crunching it down. Tilly poured orange juice. Their parents said nothing. Tilly and Caden's gazes met. She jerked her head towards their silent parents, indicating for him to start talking. Caden cleared his throat. Neither parent moved. Oh, they were so mad at him. He finished his bacon and reached for another slice. Tilly slapped his hand and pointed at their parents. No more bacon until he said something.
Mom, Dad, I know you're mad.
He began. Why on earth would we be mad? Their father said as he flipped pages of the brief before him, angrily. It's not like you completely disappeared. Didn't contact us, even after a bomb went off, and we learned you're supposedly okay, because the jackbooted thugs called the Claw come here in the middle of the night. Caden winced. He hadn't thought of his parents at all. Their mother looked over at Caden with worry, but then her gaze went to their father. She didn't look angry, just sad, as if they'd had an argument about this, considering she was the one that saw the white dragon spirit as some kind of god. She couldn't exactly question what he did at the same time, even if he sometimes wanted her to, but she'd been scared for him. Their father's fear for him was greater, because he didn't see Caden as anything but a victim of all of this.
You were scared I was hurt. But you know I can't be, not by a bomb.
He reminded their father, then with an uncomfortable laugh.
Been there, done that, gotta become a shifter.
Tilly gave him a come on, get real look that had him scrambling.
Look, I'm sorry I worried you, but Valerius thought it was best there be no electronic record of me being anywhere last night.
Valerius said. Valerius has all the control here. Their father had spun around on the stool to face him. There were hectic splotches of color on their father's cheeks.
He is the king?
Caden said lamely. That only seemed to be a match to their father's gasoline-soaked flame. He is an unelected leader who is only in charge of certain things because he can
Turn anyone and anything into a cinder? Yeah, that's maybe a little true. But that's not why I did as he asked.
Caden said, feeling a slight sense of resentment that their father was talking about his friend, his boyfriend, his lover, the king, that way. Then why did you do it? Their father demanded to know.
Because he was right.
Caden said.
Using a phone leaves a trace. People can see where I've been. It's better not to do that. The neighbors are asking about the people who stopped by our house last night.
Their mother said, rolling her lips together afterwards, a thing she did when anxious. Caden let his head hang forward.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I assumed Shione would call you, but she probably didn't for the same reason Valerius didn't want me calling you. Records.
It was also the reason that Valerius hadn't been able to drive him all the way home the night before. Instead, they had parked the car in another far-off location in reach. Caden remembered how they had both sat there, the engine ticking as they contemplated leaving one another. The flying had been thrilling, but it was the playing that had seemed to cement something between them. They'd played the equivalent of tag and hide-and-go-seek for ages. Well, they'd hid as much as dragons can. Iolaire felt that they had the advantage because they were smaller than Raziel and Valerius. However, when their big white butt was sticking out behind a hill, there wasn't much difference in effort to find them. Caden had been able to hear Raziel and Valerius's delight in all of it, and the night had ended just before the sun had come up, with them flying wingtip to wingtip through the air as the sky lightened. They had finally landed and shifted back into human forms before silently pulling on clothes. Caden had felt almost strange being in his human form. The quiet between them lasted on the drive back. It wasn't uncomfortable, not at all. Caden could feel Valerius's presence not only beside him but in his mind. It was as if they were holding hands. Caden hadn't been brave enough to take Valerius's nearest hand in his. He'd told himself at the time that it was because Valerius was driving and he didn't want to distract him. But the truth was, he hadn't been sure that he was welcomed to. They hadn't discussed the kiss. They hadn't really even acknowledged it. Was it a one-off? The start of something? What did ancient dragon shifters think about relationships? Maybe Valerius just assumed Caden knew what he meant when he kissed him. And that's what Caden had been contemplating as the engine cooled and the dawn was about to come. Valerius shifted in his seat to look over at him. Caden did the same. His heart beat rapidly. His mouth was dry.
Maybe he's going to kiss me again.
But Valerius did not move towards him, and his expression was unreadable. "I am sorry that I cannot take you all the way home," Valerius said. Caden's mouth opened and shut, and then opened again.
Thanks for wanting to.
Valerius smiled. "Of course. I've picked one of the spots close to your home, so you—"
I know the way.
Caden assured him.
It's 5 minutes in that direction.
He'd pointed vaguely towards his home. Valerius nodded. "Well, then we should say good night. I don't know if you have work today."
I do, but I'd want to go to the store anyway, even if I wasn't scheduled, to talk to Rose, Wally, and Landry.
Another nod. "Yes, but do be careful regarding who you speak in front of."
We're not going to discuss the bombing in front of customers.
Caden sounded affronted, but he wondered if they had done that yesterday. He couldn't quite remember. "Of course you aren't," Valerius said, but it was more a command than an agreement.
As a storyteller, I've always written what I most want to read. Now I'm producing what I most want to hear, which is the gay, romantic story that you're listening to now. Because these audio chapters are finding more listeners every day on YouTube and Spotify. I am finding my people. If you feel like the story is something you've always wanted to hear, come and say hi on my next chapter or my next live stream. When is that? You can check my public calendar where you'll find the next stream date under Storytime, which is often a live reading of one of my stories, plus many breaks for Q&A and chatting. Link to the calendar is in the notes.
What are you going to do? King stuff?
Caden wanted this conversation to keep going, for Valerius to stay a little longer, so that maybe he might get the courage up to ask about that kiss and what it meant. At first, Valerius's expression was blank as he repeated, "King stuff."
Yeah, whatever you do, every day.
Caden shrugged. Valerius leaned forward and brought his left hand up to his face as he laughed slightly. "Oh, yes, that. Ruling the world, you mean?"
Yeah, that. World ruling, being important, being you.
It was both harder and easier to imagine Valerius as the mighty Black Dragon King. Caden had experienced the serious side of Valerius, way too much of it, in his opinion. But tonight, he'd seen the fun side, the side where dragon butts wiggle before they pounce. "Being me." Valerius stared out of the windshield. "I told Shione when she sought me out, just before the shifters revealed themselves, that I didn't want to be king. I didn't even want to be around people, let alone angry, afraid people."
I totally get that.
Caden watched as the sky lightened, and a beam of sunlight touched Valerius's chin. He resisted the urge mightily to do the same. After all, what if he reached out and touched and found it was unwelcome? Then any fantasy he had that the kiss might really mean something would be vanquished forever. "I think maybe you do. You don't seek power yourself. You want to be left alone," Valerius said. Caden's mouth did that annoying goldfish thing of opening and shutting. He thought of lunch that day with Rose and his sister, and Jane's reaction.
Yeah, but then again, there was this woman.
Caden said.
She runs the bakery next door to Wally's, and she was really awful to Rose. Well, at first she was awful, but she sort of came around. If she'd known I was the White Dragon, I don't know if she would have done that. It wasn't just because Rose was a shifter, or even a swarm shifter, but because she was from the below, too. What if I could do something to help people by being the White Dragon?
Valerius nodded slowly. "There is some validity to that. What you say and do could have a great impact for certain."
Yeah, but I make a lot of mistakes too. And if I did or said the wrong thing, then bad things could happen, right?
"Yes, that is correct." Valerius's eyes were on his face, studying him. "You have a good heart, Caden. So does Iolair. But once you take on the mantle of power, you cannot put it down again.
Yeah, and with all the craziness with the bombs and humans first, a wrong move could lead to really bad outcomes.
Caden scrubbed his face with his hands, feeling the sand behind his eyelids, telling him it was well past time to get to bed. It's only been a few days. I know that to you it must feel like a decision must be made right away, but it doesn't. You have all of eternity to figure out what you want to be and how you want to interact with the world, Valerius assured him, and for a moment it looked like he was going to reach over and stroke Caden's cheek again, but then his hand curled into a fist and he dropped it to his lap. But dawn is breaking. We need to both get back before anyone sees us. Caden nodded. The words about the kiss died before they even reached his tongue. He told himself it was because they needed a long time to discuss it, and not because he was too chicken to say them. Valerius had pulled up the hood of his cloak and slipped out of the car. Caden did the same. With one last glance at the Black Dragon King, Caden had hurried back to his home and his bed. Now, way too few hours between getting into his bed and standing in front of his parents had passed.
I told everyone that they're from your father's work. A new case he has.
Their mother said, referring to the claw that had showed up on their doorstep last night. The fact that Valerius is using his military arm to interact with us and with Caden is not acceptable, their father said.
Dad, it's because he trusts them that he's using them. If he sent Shioni or someone else, people would notice. Word would spread.
Caden pointed out. Their mother finally brought the platter of pancakes over to the island and started putting some on his plate. She also set out syrup she had warmed and sweet cream butter.
I'm sorry that you were worried about me. I get it that things are tense and different. I didn't mean for you to be.
Caden said as their mother buttered his pancakes for him, which was so odd but so motherly too that he didn't point it out. Caden, we need to know where you are. Their father sighed, brushing his dark hair off of his forehead.
You look tired, Dad.
Guilt pricked at him. Thanks, son. I so appreciate being reminded.
I just meant that you look like you're really working hard. And you are, for me.
For all of us, Caden, what happens to you affects this entire family.
I just don't know if I can promise that you'll know where I am every second of the day.
Caden found himself saying. He had to explain how things were going to be. He clenched his hand around his fork.
I need to shift every day. So that means I have to get away when I can. I won't be able to call you and tell you all the time. And there will be things with Valerius that I have to do.
What things do you have to do with Valerius? Their father's voice was a touch sharp. He really didn't like the Black Dragon King.
Dragon shifter stuff.
And that hardly sounded better than king stuff.
He's teaching me how to do all of this. Iolair is so laid back that I didn't realize it needed to get out more. I have to make sure that I don't harm the spirit. Valerius is the only one who can tell me.
He's not the only one, Caden. There are other dragon shifters in this world. 7 others, their father said. But Caden was shaking his head before their father had even finished saying that.
I don't want them. I just want Valerius.
Their father's eyes narrowed. Tilly even looked a little alert. He played back his words and winced. His crush on the ancient Black Dragon King had slipped in there. He absolutely couldn't let his parents know about that and the mate thing. Their father would have him whisked away in a red-hot minute from Reach and Valerius if he knew.
Not that he could stop Valerius from finding us, if Valerius would want to find us.
Iolair continued to snooze contentedly. He was alone in his worries.
I meant
Caden decided to clarify.
that I want to keep who knows on the White Dragon Shifter to the one other Dragon Shifter that already knows. Valerius. The others
Are coming here to meet you. Their father completed the sentence, not in the way that Caden had intended.
not to meet me. To check me out. See if I'm a threat or a whatever.
He would not say mate. He would most definitely not say mate. They likely wish to know if you want your slice of the earth, a territory of your own, their father said.
Well, I don't.
Their father's head rose. Don't be so hasty to say that, Caden. Think about being beholden to Valerius or whatever other dragon shifter's territory you're in. If you had your own, you wouldn't have to worry about...
Dad, I don't want my own territory. I don't know the first thing about ruling people. Besides, assuming they would give me anything, it would be like Antarctica or something, where there are no people and it's cold or it's too hot or whatever. It would suck.
Caden told him, feeling a mounting panic at the idea of their father pushing this territory thing. We would ensure that doesn't happen, their father answered.
Who are we?
Me and your other lawyers, of course.
I have lawyers.
Caden's eyebrows rose up.
You mean your firm or...
They are your lawyers, Caden. I am your lawyer, and we are going to make sure that you get what's yours. Their father looked so determined and proud at that moment that Caden didn't want to burst his bubble. He saw Tilly drinking orange juice to keep whatever words inside her that wanted to come out.
Dad, you can't lawyer me into a territory. No dragon is going to give up even an inch of land for another dragon. I'd have to fight them for it, and I'm not a fighting type of dragon shifter.
Caden thought of the terror he'd felt facing Valerius. Even if he were to fight one of the smaller dragons, they were far bigger than him and knew the way of aerial combat. He also thought of how Valerius had gotten his spirit in battle. The others, Valerius claimed, had received theirs in similar terrible circumstances.
So that's not happening. Besides, Valerius told me I could stay.
Had he said that? Explicitly? Or had Caden just said he was staying and Valerius hadn't drop-kicked him out?
What about the kiss? That must mean he wants me to stay. Damn it. I should have talked to him this morning about it. Now I don't know where I stand.
He doesn't have any right to remove you. Their father was quivering, likely with, again, legal arguments. We are a nation of laws. The world is governed by them, not by the size of your...
Dragon?
Tilly asked. There was silence around the island. But then their mum, Tilly, and Caden laughed. Their father finally did too. After the chuckles died away, their father said, Seriously, though, the shifters want to be seen as human in some ways, not animals. So your situation needs to be handled in a civilized manner, in the courts, not by dragon battles. That's what the world will want. That's what the shifters overall will want. The dragons must know this. The law will protect you, Caden. You'll see. Caden didn't say anything. Their father believed in the law, but he'd never seen their father so enthused about it. It was as if this had revived their father's hopes and dreams. And maybe it had. He would be a partner in more than name now. He would be in charge of things, because his son was the White Dragon Shifter.
Wraith Rain puts out new releases, sales, new art, previews of upcoming stories, and at least 2 free books or manga every month. If you don't want to miss anything, you have 2 options. One is to keep coming back to our YouTube community tab, which we use as a blog for quick announcements and polls. The other is to join our mailing list, where we go into even more detail. The link to both the community tab and our mailing list form is in the notes.